Okay, got it.
Yes.
Okay, so I guess I just want to get a feeling for JLo, John's and Anne's responses to James' overview there of the proposals coming from the interim Rebel Hive Mind.
JLo, do you mind if I start, or do you want to start, or Andy?
Go ahead, that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in terms of concept, let me try to put it in terms of, there's like a, how should I say this? A board can be very restrictive or very open. And certainly we would like to proceed in as open a manner as possible. But that depends on the relationship and the conduct of the Rebel Hive Mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that from our perspective, it hasn't been entirely positive in terms of the emails we've received and what happened this weekend. So again, the option that Jane suggested is or maybe it was Terry, about having a member of the Rebel Hive Mind on the board isn't, completely out of consideration. Although actually you already have one, because Emma's in the Rebel Hive Mind and she's on the board. But let's assume that, so to me, the problem's already resolved. But assuming that you want to think about that, and I think what you're really saying is that you want someone in the inner circle of the Rebel Hive Mind to be on the board and not just someone in a group. I think one of the things that the Rebel Hive Mind needs to do is to first have some understanding of what's going on in Extinction Rebellion and what's going on the board. And the first thing that is important to understand is this is an actions board. We're not here for mobilization. So the Rebel Hive Mind's objective has to be actions. That's number one. Number two is that within Extinction Rebellion, or within XR Actions, Inc., there are at this point two organizations. There's the Global Climate Action Project, which is a cluster of affinity groups that JLo and I are running. And there's the Rebel Hive Mind. The Rebel Hive Mind, I'm speaking of like my communications with people like Michelle, seem to think that the affinity groups report to the Rebel Hive Mind, and they don't. So before we would go forward, there has to be an understanding of this by the Rebel Hive Mind. And if we're going to have one person from one group, maybe we need one from another. In fact, you've already got two, because both JLo and I are running that group. But we need to sort of correct these fundamental things. And then the other point is that I think that the board deserves to know that what you're creating is sustainable. I mean, I've seen all the paperwork and changes and this and that, but I mean, you seem to you're saying we want a place on the board when you really haven't done anything. And I'm not even sure what you're going to do. So right. It does seem important that that there's some period of time or some demonstrated action before we get serious about this type of suggestion, which I certainly admit is a reasonable suggestion, and it would deserve some consideration. And then finally, I think we need to understand, because it's an actions group, that we need agreement from the Rebel Hive Mind that this is a volunteer organization. It may be that, like, if I'm just saying hypothetically, that Donald and Nick decide to go to Washington, D.C. and set up XR groups there and start engaging in actions, which in fact, it may be that some of them will be going there in 2 weeks. And they say to us, we need money for lodging, that this would be the type of thing that the Rebel Hive Mind needs to understand, that the affinity groups need to understand, and the board needs to address. We may be agreeing, the board may say to them, sure, we'll give you $1,000 if you're going to stay here and there. I know that Ann and I have talked about paying bail, things like that.
Yeah.
But we are not going to be paying stipends. We're not funding anybody, at least not with the money we have now. So if we can get through all of those, differences, then I think we're more in a position, once you get operating, to talk about what you're suggesting.
Okay, thank you, John. So I'm just going to give a moment for Terry or Jane to just respond to that, and I'll just kind of summarize.
Before you do that, Linda,
yes,
I'd like to make sure we're clear on some things before we go talking about them.
Sure, thank you, JLo. Go for it.
The first is to understand, I think that there were two corporations set up to support the XR America movement overall. One was XR Mobilization, which was set up to support XR America as a group. The second was XR Actions, which was set up originally specifically to support the big agenda for Washington, D.C. and other big actions. So the mobilization was set up for XR America to mobilize, educate, go out and start chapters, put together all the trainings and the manuals, do all the things to build an organization nationwide. The actions are specifically designed to support actions, people who are doing things, people who are going out and doing nonviolent civil disobedience. That's what it's designed for, the actual boots on the ground. And so they're really two separate entities, which is, we've known this the whole time, and they were designed to support two different things. So mobilization was designed to support XR America as an organization, right, with the launch team and all the different things. And then the actions was designed to support boots on the ground, things like what Nick, needing some bail money, or other things around, putting together signs for a big giant action in Washington, D.C. and so forth. So just to give you a little history, right, about how that worked and why that was designed that way. So I think it's really important to know that. The second thing is that understand that the organization, the corporation, is not subservient to or beholden to any other group. It is a support organization created for the benefit of deciding who we can support. The Walk with Nick, the Washington, D.C. agenda to do the mass nonviolent civil disobedience, that was designed to do those things. And so when the board hears, and I'm speaking for myself as part of the board, when the board hears demands and then sees vicious emails going around undermining the board and these kinds of things, it's really hard to see what the benefit of the board saying, well, sure, we want to help you, to be honest with you. I mean, the amount of undermining that has gone on is evident, is really shocking. And so I, as a board member, have to say, first of all, it doesn't appear that the Hive is oriented towards actions. It's more towards mobilization based upon what I've seen so far. And second of all, the attacks on the board members is pretty egregious. And frankly, I'm stunned and shocked. So I just want to say that when we talk about it, is just to be clear on those things. So when the proposals come out at the beginning, rather than begin to talk about all these things, when I'm seeing proposals at the beginning about, well, we want a seat on the board. It's like, okay, but that wasn't something that we were aware was going to be asked about. And I don't know who we are. And I don't know, so there's a lot of pieces that have been thrown on the table suddenly in the face of some considerable differences in understanding, I think.
Yeah, so as I hear what you and John are saying right now is that the actions board and the mobilization board are very separate, and they have different objectives. And John is saying that we need all of these other things to be resolved before we can even take on board considering these proposals that are in the agenda from the Rebel Hive Mind, even though John is saying they sound like great ideas. I think most of us would agree that having a member of the Rebel Hive Mind go on your board meetings and have somebody from your board come on to our meetings does seem like a really good way forward in terms of perhaps opening up communication and transparency. So I'm just going to just see how Terry or Jane respond to JLo and John's comments so far. Jane.
Thanks, Linda. I agree that the tax attacks have been pretty yucky. And I think that, again, we all want to see this movement succeed. And I think that's why we're all here. And there, I feel that there have been a lot of attempts to try to collect information that have been difficult to get. And so here we are, and we have a platform to begin to interact with each other and figure out where the boundaries are, what's needed, what can happen, what can't happen. And so I think there's some real value in addressing what we need to address and letting a lot of the interaction stuff just, if we want to move forward, we need to put some things aside, I think. And that's just my opinion. And so I want to say that the Rebel Hive Mind, John, to address something you said earlier, we have not seen Emma in the meetings for that. So we currently have Terry, myself, Linda, Linda R, Michelle and Faith meeting, and Roger's facilitating those meetings on Monday morning. Will has come a few times to those meetings to contribute. And we consider ourselves the interim Hive Mind that on October 11th, we're having official elections, and we hope to hand that all over to whoever, get into those positions. John has a clarification, and then Anne has a clarification.
I didn't mean to imply, Jane, that Emma has been at the meetings. What I reviewed was your, it looked like sort of an organization chart, if that's the right term, of who is going to be in the organization. And quite frankly, I questioned some of the entries, but I noticed that Emma was there. That's all I was referring to.
Thank you. Yeah.
Also, I'm there, and so is Donald, and so is Nick. And I don't think any of us have been to the meetings either. And I don't intend to go to the meetings if I can get out of it, because I'm not really into, the bureaucracy of things, the structural, I realize that it's kind of necessary, but I'm not into building it up.
Got it. Thank you. So then moving along, I wanted to also, sorry, I got a little taken off track here. The global climate, I'm sorry, could you tell me the name of that again? Action
Project.
Global Climate Action Project. Okay. So I appreciate knowing about this. And I think that that I wonder if we're doing a little bit of the same thing, only different, and trying to fill the same void, duplicate those kind of teams. And I don't know that. I'm just curious that that we've been probably trying to do the same thing at the same time with different names. Check, John.
Well,
John?
Let's go back to history. We finished what I thought was a successful mediation, and the decision was made that John and Jayla would leave the launch team and form affinity groups. and that you and Faith and other members of the Movement Vitality Circle would reorganize the launch team into a circle or a hive or whatever. And repeatedly I've been asked, what am I doing? And repeatedly I have said this, reminded people this is what we're doing. I don't think the things that we're doing are, I think we both have the same objective. I hope we do, but we're going to do it in a completely different way. We're not going to have any rules. We're not going to have a structure. We're only going to have projects. And some projects will last a week or 2 weeks. Some will last a year, but that's how we're going to proceed in a completely different way, because frankly, we're concerned that the structure process of XRA has never worked, and we don't see why it's going to work in the future. But we understand that you believe differently, and we're fully supportive of it. We have an announcement to all rebels defining this. And JLo and I have sat on it for 2 or 3 weeks, even though we didn't want to, because we didn't want to disturb your recruitment effort. We were afraid if we sent out something else, people might get confused no matter what we said. So we've been holding off. And I can release it tonight. I mean, it's ready. But then again, I thought, well, what if the Rebel Hive Mind is trying to talk to some people and make some decisions? This may distract them. So, we decided not to do it, but we're there, and we're a formal structure. We're a separate structure. And I mean, I think we have to be honest. At the conclusion of the mediation, I think we all agreed we couldn't work together. I mean, we could work together to some degree, but we weren't all going to be on the same team. And that's why we split up. And we're not going to change that. Sorry.
Okay.
We're going to go in our direction, and maybe we work, maybe we fail, but we have every reason to support the Rebel Hive Mind, because the Rebel Hive Mind does important things like website, media and messaging. I mean, there's all sorts of things that we could have a symbiotic, is that the right word? I forget the right word, but anyway, we'd have a relationship that would be positive, but it has to be understood that it's separate.
Okay, so thank you for that, John.
I think Jane had a question.
Yeah, if you just don't mind me saying just for the moment, perhaps we might all agree that any kind of major announcements about where you might be going in the future might be just a bit outside the agenda, even though I'm sure we're all just totally ears flapping. This sounds great. We'd like to know more about it, but it may just open up a whole other agenda item that may sidetrack us right now from kind of talking about what we need in order to get this all worked out. And so, did you say JLo had a comment? JLo? Jane, go.
Yes, thank you. How could you please help me see how do you see the affinity group interacting with the board? Like how do you see, John, when you were just describing that after the mediation that we decided to part, that's not exactly my understanding of how we left the mediation, but going to your expression, if the affinity group has to interact somehow with the board, and Rebel Hive Mind has to interact somehow with the board, and maybe Rebel Hive Mind interacts with the affinity group because of things like website or whatever. Like, how do you see that whole thing working? If you could please just explain.
JLo, you want to run with that?
Yeah, I think the different affinity groups are going to approach the board in slightly different ways. I mean, the real question, as far as I can tell, the Rebel Hive Mind has no interest in XR actions per se, other than hoping to get funding and hoping to have someone who can handle the parts that the Hive Mind doesn't do, like some of the communications, website, those kinds of things. I'm not really sure. My hope is that Rebel Hive Mind will submit proposals to the board. And I think that will be the way that anybody who approaches the board needing some assistance and support will do it. They'll approach the board with a proposal, the board will review a proposal, and then it'll be thumbs up or thumbs down or a request for modifications or further information, right? That's how normal boards that like this operate. So I think it's going to be pretty standard. John, did I miss anything?
No, other than perhaps I'll go to that last item in your list, Jane, about, would you use the term keys? But I'm assuming management over some of our systems, proposed keys jointly held by the board. And I think that what we're talking about is, if you're talking about things like Nation Builder, Google Docs, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I'm just traveling back to the agenda. Yeah, yeah. Nation Builder, Google, whatever.
Then the one of the purposes of the overarching group over the affinity groups is to provide services to the affinity groups. So for example, if Youth on Fire attracts people to do an action in DC and they want to have access to set up their own Google Doc file, we would help them do that. That would be one of our functions. At the same time, the Rebel Hive Mind would also be able to manage those systems. You would have your infrastructure coordinating circle, I forget the new name, but and you would also manage those. The board simply pays for them and makes them accessible to you. So if you're asking, are we going to have our own ability to go into those systems and run them, the answer would be, of course.
Okay, so that would be like a the affinity group and Rebel Hive Mind would be able to.
I mean, in a sense, it's how we do it now. I mean, for example, Google Docs, there are a number of people who are super users. In Nation Builder, you're an admin. I'm an admin, so I don't think there'll be a lot of changes. We'll just have to coordinate and somehow figure out a way to report to the board.
Okay, so it almost sounds, John, like the affinity group is sort of an action circle, just that you would want to be the action circle without the bureaucracy of.
No, if I can. Affinity groups are affinity groups. They come to XR actions with proposals and requests. So for example, let's say we had a Washington, DC 2023 million person, nonviolent civil disobedience action that we were planning, right? Some affinity group. They could come and say, we need support in the following ways. We need support on email. We need support in Nation Builder. We need support in some funding. We need support in some media. And to that extent, if the board decides to support that action, the board would say, you bet, that sounds great. Let's talk about what that would look like. So for example, if Nick and Donald and a couple of other folks from Florida who've done such amazing things down there decide to go to Washington, DC and organize a big action in Washington, DC here for Thanksgiving, right? Thanks for giving us the planet, right? Then that would receive, they could make a proposal to the board. The board would say, that's great. Here's the $1,500 you asked for. And we've just set up your email. So it's designed to support action directly. Not mobilization, not other stuff, not bureaucracy, just.
Does this particular action affinity group have a title, JLo?
Which one?
I mean, the one that you're talking about now that would be supporting.
Oh, for Washington, DC 2023?
Yes, for those sorts of things, yeah.
No, that does not yet have it. That's just an idea that's been kicked around. So there isn't an official affinity group yet for Washington, DC 2023, but we'll see.
So,
Maybe to answer Linda's question, there are 4 existing affinity groups within the.
Oh, I see what you mean. Okay.
Why don't you maybe I'd explain it to her that way?
Yeah. No, go ahead, John. Go ahead. I need to make some notes because I'm just.
There are 4 active groups. One is the rave revolution.
Mhm,
Whether or not that happens, we don't know, but we've set it up.
mhm,
The other is the Global Climate Criminal Project,
mhm,
which hasn't really been announced formally, but it's starting. The
mhm.
other is the H4X and nonviolent civil disobedience training programs. And there's one more, but I can't think of it.
Mm-mm.
Youth on Fire?
Youth on Fire. And I'm setting that up because increasingly the youth out of the Florida group are not pure XRA, but we're trying to keep working with them and keep them involved as much as we can.
Okay. Jane or Terry, do you have a question regarding those 4 existing affinity groups and how they're established and about their relationship to the Rebel Hive Mind moving forward, Terry?
Yeah, slightly. Just clarification, really.
Yeah.
Now, my memory going back, there was a pretty staunch resistance to non-XRA branded affinities. And it seems like, and I'm not saying this is a bad thing. It seems like we're kind of backing away from that and saying we will kind of endorse and assist other branded activist groups as long as they, have a kind of alignment or affinity with us. And my question is just simply, is that a shift? Is that the kind of shift that the affinity groups represent?
That would certainly be true for Youth on Fire. And it is the type of change that we've discussed with Roger.
Okay, that helps to know that.
Yeah. J-Lo?
Yeah, it's also in alignment with some of the stuff that was done with XR World, where there were other groups aside from XR that were brought in and other speakers and other things, and trying to broaden this out. Trying to remain an island unto ourselves didn't really work in terms of mobilization in the US. So it looks like the youth are really a sort of forward-leading edge, and that continues on every day. But and so what I've learned is they're not all on Instagram, they're not all on Facebook. Very few are. They're not all on TikTok. They're all doing multiple things, and so in that regard, you kind of have to be able to adjust and flex and flow with where the youth want to head, right? So I mean, Florida is the example of what's working.
Really?
Although we need to work better.
Not where I live in Florida. But anyway, one other point of clarification, and I guess Jane or John is up. I don't see who went up first, but I got to confess that I'm kind of lost in the language around mobilization and actions. As you've initially explained the distinction, J-Lo, then I'm going, well, but the board is what's named actions, and there's nobody named mobilization. And so I'm trying to track the semantics here, and it's just not coming together.
Sure, I can help with that.
What I am getting clear in my own thinking is if we've got 3 entity types or 3 entities we're working with, one of which has a mobilization mandate, the other of which has an actions mandate, and I'm not saying one or the other, neither nor. I'm just saying if those are the 2 kinds of mandates at work, and then there's the affinity groups with their own mandates and roles, not that we have to document them that way, but if those are the 3 clusters, if you will, of activity, effort, volunteer service, whatever you want to call it, I think what the real crux of the issue here is how does the synergy, and you said symbiotic, John, that's as good a word or better. How does the synergy between these 3 work? I mean, what is that dynamic between the 3? I mean, it's a rhetorical question for the moment.
Right.
But any comments on it, I'd certainly, if you can help me understand the language a little better, that would help.
I don't know the answer yet,
Well,
but I think it has to begin with the Rebel Hive Mind understanding the difference, because I don't think that's there yet.
Right.
And then we're just going to have to work it out working together.
Okay, that helps.
And I think a real key here is that, XR America as an organization was set up to do mobilization, right? I mean, we mobilize Americans from all walks of life, and so to understand that's what it was set up for. and in some sense, that didn't work, despite $350,000 and, you know, over 50 different mobilizers on pay and everything else. It just didn't happen. And so due to a lack of funding and lack of ability to get funding, XR Mobilization as a corporation has shut down. That leaves XR America with some decisions about how they're reorganizing, what they want to focus on, right? One would hope it's mobilization, because that still needs to happen. And then mobilization leads to action. So that was the goal of XR America, right? To set up all those chapters and to set up all those groups and to get those people transitioned so that they could then go and take action, right? Like Linda's doing a great job of XR Rochester. I mean, you know, and next thing you know, there's going to be more and more people there and there'll be actions. So I think that's part of it. Also, if we think, one of the things that we noticed when we were trying to get funding this year was that even the Climate Emergency Fund did not want to give money to XR Mobilization. They said, however, if we have some action projects that we wanted to go for, that they would consider reviewing proposals, right? I mean, that was what we were told by that group. And so I think it's just emblematic. How we work together, I think, you know, it's all about the actions. It's all about what actions are happening, how are they happening, who's doing them, who's coordinating them, and how are they going forward, right? Which is why, you know, John and I have been very action oriented. I'll tell you right now, I'm not going to do a weekly meeting. Maybe someone else will, but I'm not doing weekly meetings, because to me, weekly meetings, in essence, between organizations are supercharged loss of time. Probably everything that's important can be done in 15 minutes or over a couple of emails or between key liaisons, I think. There's a lot of talking that goes on, a lot of stuff, but there's not a lot of action. So I'm really action oriented. It's got to be rubber hitting the road.
All right, I'm just going to ask either Jane or Terry to chip in terms of the new, you know, the infrastructure that we talked about at our meeting today. There is an actions circle, isn't there, that remains to be peopled with an internal coordinator and an external coordinator. But it's there, right? So I'm just wondering what the difference will be between that and what JLo and John are doing with the actions board, or are they the same thing and replicating each other? I guess I'm a bit confused. Seem like a fair question.
I think if you asked a question, can John answer it? So maybe that provides clarification.
Yeah, okay, John?
The difference is that we don't report to the Rebel Hive Mind.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, it seems like the Rebel Hive Mind came up with this construct that puts in an action circle, and it says John is resigning on October 11th. And that's not something we came up with. It's something that you guys came up with, and I don't know. Jane?
I think Jane wants to say something.
Jane?
And I want to respond to that. The Rebel Hive Mind, in my understanding, this is a mirror of what we've already created in XRA. It is the 5 circles that we have been operating under, at least since I've been there. And so there's the movement vitality circle, the action circle, the infrastructure circle, the community organizing circle, and the external communication circle. So all the circles are the same. It's the same model. It's the same thing, really. So it's not something that we created or came up with. It's just something that we're starting with. How do we move into all these changes? Let's look at what we have first. This is what we have. Now, how do we have to adjust it or figure out what to do differently? So we didn't create any of that. It was already.
Terry?
Yeah, John, I want to come back to what you said about, I think what you said, and I might be paraphrasing, but I think I'll get pretty close. The XR Actions Board, or the board, does not report to the Rebel Hive Mind. What's the other half of that sentence?
No, you misunderstood. The question was, at least maybe it's probably my fault. Maybe I didn't explain it right. The question I heard from Linda and to some extent from Jane, is what is the difference between the Hive Mind's action circle and the affinity groups that John and JLo are running? And my point is the difference is that we're independent, where if you had a Rebel Hive Mind action circle, that person would be part of the Rebel Hive Mind. We're not.
Okay.
Jane? Jane?
Thanks. So I hear what you're saying, John, and the Rebel Hive Mind, I just wanted to like clarify, the Rebel Hive Mind is itself a representative of each of the circles. And it's not like they're reporting to, it's that they're like saying, here's what's happening in this circle. Here's what's happening over here, what we're doing. Hey, could you help with putting events on the website or whatever it is each circle needs. So it's essentially like a launch team-esque place, which I hate to say even refer to, because it's not like a big making place for the whole group. It's sharing what's happening within each circle. So by reporting to, it's really more like asking for things that we need to share help with and letting each other know what the other arms are doing in the organization, keeping tabs and figuring out what our next steps might be.
Okay, so I'm hearing Jane saying that the Rebel Hive Mind or the Action Circle still has an independent relationship from the Rebel Hive Mind. You don't go to the Rebel Hive Mind and ask for permission to do anything. But you do go to the Rebel Hive Mind to ask for support, right? And so I guess I'm just wondering from, John's point of view in terms of the action board, which he's saying is also independent and doesn't have to ask for, that seems like the similarity. I guess I'm wondering, where does the board go to for support?
If I can,
Okay.
that's incorrect. So
Okay.
The difference is that the Action Circle has mandates and has territory, as you will, defined by the hive mind. Isn't that correct? Mm-hmm. Right. So you're subservient to, even if you want to do things independently, you can't go out and create your own new circles that duplicate the other circles. Isn't that right? So the Action Circle inside of the hive mind can't decide to just go off and do new circles and do other things outside of its mandate. It's still subservient to the Uber mandate given to it by the hive mind itself, right? So in that sense, it's in the stack of the hive mind. The difference is XR Actions is a corporation, it's a legal entity, and it's a separate entity. And it could literally walk away and have nothing to do with XR ever again in terms of XR America. But the Action Circle is still subservient and connected to interdependent with the rest of the hive mind. XR Actions could say, we're going to go create these other XR Actions type groups that are going to be affinity groups that do a huge thing in DC and do a huge thing in Miami and do a huge thing over here and support those individual groups. But those groups are not subservient to XR Actions. They're independent entities that are working collaboratively with the corporation. Does that make sense?
How are they working collaboratively, JLo? I hear you and I'm understanding you, but I guess I'm just wondering, and I'm stepping my bounds as a facilitator, but what is the relationship of what you're describing there to the Rebel Hive Mind? Why would you go off and be a separate entity? What would be the advantages in that? And if you did go off and become a separate entity, what would you call yourself? And what would your relationship to the Rebel Hive Mind be there? And
sure. Let me just say one thing and then John. It's not, we could go off. We are a separate entity. Mm-hmm. We're a separate legal entity. We're a separate organization. We have separate meetings. It's a separate entity created independently. John, did you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I want to just get some clarification. Are we talking about the Rebel Hive Mind relating to the global action project affinity groups? Or are we talking about the Rebel Hive Mind relating to XR Actions Inc.? Which one?
I think the short answer to that is yes.
I mean, well, yes, I'm not sure the health. I want to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. I'm getting the impression that your concern, Linda, is that why would we go off and create these separate affinity groups when we could do so in an action circle? And my answer is that we are going to have nothing to do with SOS in any way. There will be no mandates.
Mhm.
There will be no SOS experts. There will be no interim. All of these things will not be, we were not going to get involved in them. We're going to approach this as a project. So we're not going to deal with SOS, and we're not going to deal with even having to ask anybody if they can help us. We'll take care of ourselves. And if we need something, we'll go to the board, or hopefully we're going to be able to have a relationship with the Rebel Hive Mind where we'll say things like, look, there's this new group that is active, you know, there's young mothers, and they want to join us, and they want to go and have a strike in Washington, DC, and we'd like to get some funding for them, but could the Rebel Hive Mind help set up the social media campaign and put them on the website? And we could work together in that sense. Mm-hmm. But it'll be that type of relationship, and not being a member or part of the Rebel Hive Mind organization.
Jane?
Thank you for that clarity, John. And I think that sounds like an interesting way to work together. JLo, I wanted to ask you, when you were talking and you said there's a separate legal entity, do you mean that there's a separate legal entity for the affinity group?
No,
Groups?
no, there's no separate legal entity for the affinity groups. No.
Okay, that's what I thought. So how how does an affinity group join your collection of groups, or is it just you guys, or how does, like, do other affinity groups join, or are you just trying to do, like, you guys are doing your own thing? And I'm just wondering about that. Is that a thing, an open thing that people can, other groups join in? And I'll stop there.
Yeah.
All right.
Go ahead, John. Did you want to say something?
No, I didn't. I was
okay. I didn't want to step on your toes. Yeah, I mean, the way that we've been approached so far is that people are interested in a project, and then they approach saying, we're interested in doing this as an affinity group and creating a project. So, for example, let's say you had, Mothers of Southern Oregon, and you wanted to do an action in Grants Pass. You could approach us with your idea and talk to the board, or submit a proposal to the board, and the board will review it and see if it's something that they want to support. Does that make sense?
Excuse me. And in what way? Yes. But what would I say that was the case? And so what would I be looking to get out of? I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think I've said before, funding and structural support. I mean, this goes back to an idea from me over a year ago, where we proposed to our primary XR funder the idea of creating a climate infrastructure group to support organizations. And so our goal is to support affinity groups that want to take action.
Okay. So, sorry, Terry, I just want to finish my thought. So how, okay, say I'm the moms in Grants Pass, which, oh.
You can drive in a pickup truck, it's okay.
I don't know, that's really pushing it. But I'm going with that vision for a minute. And so you're suggesting that I would say, hey, okay, we're trying to get an action together. We're going to meet outside the Grange here and do an action. And so are you saying that I would, that group or whatever, that affinity group would approach you two as the group of affinity groups, or the entire board to get funding or whatever? So are we talking about joining the group of affinity groups, the 4 groups that you were talking about, the Rave Revolution and the Youth on Fire, those things, or to have another group? Or am I approaching the board saying, hey, I'm looking for some money for posters and whatever else?
Okay.
It could be either.
I think I was next, but go ahead, Joe.
Yeah,
I'm
Terry.
sorry, just answering the question. It could be either.
Yeah, Terry.
Okay, well, I'm kind of changing the subject, so if he wants to answer the question, go
Good.
ahead, John. You're up, John.
Your turn, Terry.
It's your turn, Terry.
All right. This changes the subject, and I think John will want to come back and respond to Jane, but Lord knows I would love nothing better than to see whatever this organization becomes focused on project management. Wet dream come true. I mean, really. And the fact that that's what the funders want to think about is projects. And the fact that you want the affinity groups to think about projects and project plans and project proposals and project outlines and project staffing and all of that complexity around project and project management, that's an excellent dynamic for the whole group to work with, I believe. Now, it's a bias, but it is the only dynamic in for-profit, nonprofit, volunteer, paid staff. It is the only dynamic I have ever seen consistently work. So I'm delighted with that idea. And if that's kind of where your head is at with the affinity groups, I'll just hypothetically, let's use the example, so this will kind of take it back to you and Jane, John. The Grants Pass, was it?
Grants Pass, yeah.
Somebody, the mothers of the Pacific Northwest, come to us, the 3 groups of us, and they present to the affinity group. I'm going to say J-Lo and John and Ann, and they present to the affinity group a project proposal, which is just a simple document. Then we help them figure out which resources in our 3 groups, your affinity group, the board, and the Hive Mind, which resources does that project need from those 3 groups? And we start working right there around a resource plan for their project.
Yep.
And funding at the same time. So it gives me chills to think about how robust that dynamic could be if we can get all 3 of us bought into that perspective. All 6 of us. I mean, I didn't mean to reduce it to 3. So I just wanted to throw that in there because that's the most encouraging thing. Not that I'm discouraged by any of it, but that's the most encouraging thing that I've heard this conversation bring to the surface. So back to you and John and Jane, back to you 2.
Okay, so we've got 20 more minutes before
John
we
has
have
his hand raised.
Oh, yeah, I've only got 3 of you on the screen at the one time. So yeah, go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
I want to spend a few minutes and ask about your elections. I just want to make sure I reserve some time so I understand how your election process works. I did review the Constitution is pretty. I need a quick answer, or a somewhat quick answer about the election. So if you could reserve a little time for that, I'd appreciate it. I believe that most of the issues that we wanted to raise at the bottom of the agenda have been discussed.
All right. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to ask Jane and Terry just to chime in there with John's request right now to perhaps focus on just how the election works, but just Terry's last point about you know, maybe this is something that we could be mobilizing around that seems to be something that's exciting to everybody. Do either of you have anything to chime in on with regard to that point? And we've got 20 minutes left, and I guess I'm looking for some action points and something that we can all agree on for the end of the meeting, and end on a positive note, something that we all feel good about. So Jane and Terry.
I'm going to defer to Jane on the election question, because I don't really know the answer to that one, at least not in any detail. I know that it's a process that we have documented, but I don't know what the details are. So I'm going to defer to Jane on that one. A footnote to what I said about the project management would be, there's an important distinction that comes into play that I think might help the Uber affinity group, okay? The affinity group that manages the affinity groups that come to us, okay? That feels more like what I would call a program office. A program office, like program management, as opposed to specific project management. You take projects as they come up, and programmatically, systematically, you coordinate the individual projects, but you are always looking at the whole picture, the whole roster of all the projects at the same time. That's that program project distinction is crucial. Okay, Jane, all yours. Tell us about elections.
Okay, so I'm going to say I'm not the specialist on the elections. Really, Michelle is much better at this. So my understanding is that each circle nominates a representative to come into the hive mind, and then that that representative, how are they? The circle themselves votes in the representative. So it's not the hive mind that votes in the representative from each one. It's each circle says, I nominate Terry to be, or whatever, whoever. And how does it, you know, and they come to an agreement based on our decision-making process is here in the proposal, which I'm guessing you guys didn't have a chance to read the whole thing yet, but because it's kind of lengthy. But so basically each circle votes in their representative.
So has that happened? Because I know on your diagram, I'm sorry, I should have raised my hand, I'm sorry.
That's okay, John, go ahead.
Has that happened? Because on the diagram from today, it shows the RHM representative.
That has not happened. That is happening on the 11th, next Monday. So the diagram today, this is a proposed, like, here's how we see this, you know, the people involved in these circles are this, these are the nominee people.
Okay.
And I want to also add the, I could be wrong about this, but I believe that the Rebel Hive Mind representative does not have to be the external coordinator. If the external coordinator is not available or sick or out of town, or they don't want to be the Rebel Hive Mind connection, then they can
So theoretically, the say the movement vitality circle, Linda R could be the representative, but somebody else could be the IC, theoretically.
Theoretically, correct.
Okay.
Terry?
Terry has his hand raised.
Terry?
So yeah, there are three, right? There's an internal coordinator, the IC, the external coordinator, the EC. And Jane, I think, was specifically talking about while the hive mind representative from a subsidiary circle could be the EC, doesn't have to be. It can be two different people. Is that right, Jane? I'm just trying to make it clear in my own thinking. Okay, thanks.
All right. Can I ask? I have a question about the Rebel Hive Mind.
Go ahead, Jello.
What is the intended focus or the mission of the Rebel Hive Mind going forward after it's organized?
I'm going to say we have yet to clarify our mission statement. We're coming from a scrambled place of what do we do with all the circles after this upheaval. So
Sure.
we, and again, we're the interim Rebel Hive Mind. So part of our intention was to provide a pathway to the real Rebel Hive Mind, whoever is elected, and they can make some decisions. So we as the interim group didn't want to be making larger decisions without the real Rebel Hive Mind voting on those and talking about those.
And that's going to happen on the 11th.
We're handing over, yes. So on the 11th will be the day of like, okay, who's the official Hive Mind? And then they can start moving forward with a mission statement, what the focus is, and part of what we're trying to do is clarify how the interaction is with the board in advance of that, so that the Rebel Hive Mind can know how to interact with the board and make decisions based on that.
Anne has a question.
I have a question.
Yes, Anna?
Okay. It looks to me like there are only 7 people who are basically the members of the various circles. I don't know this Gwen B, but I do know that Donald Z and myself and Nick V and Emma, we haven't really been participating. So
Mhm.
do you have more than 7 people participating in all these circles?
Well, the entire external communication circle, like I said, was carried over from the last iteration of XRA. So those people, Gwen, Bishop, and Emma, Faith, Donald,
Mm.
they were working in the external communication circle before it, with Donald being.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. Terry?
No, I'm not sure, and I'm not sure where other people like, say, Graham and Bert are ending up in this Tumblr.
I don't see Bert listed at all.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying that's not something we should let fall through the cracks.
Right. Yes.
They were really productive on the walk with Nick, and I'd hate to see them not be part of this new program and
Yes.
project way of doing
Yes.
it.
Jane?
I just want to add that Bert has indicated that the walk with Nick has pretty much taken his steam out of the engine for now.
All right. I guess, may I just ask a question of JLo, Anne, and John? I'm just wondering, with the Actions Board, as you've been kind of describing it, for the rest of us, and I'm kind of, thank you for that. I've been listening to you, and it's good to have that clarification. I'm just wondering, if the Rebel Hive Mind didn't exist, what would happen to the Actions Board as you've been describing it? I mean, you need a Rebel Hive Mind, don't you? For JLo mentioned, come to us or the Rebel Hive Mind for financial support, for backing, for funding. I think that the Action Board really needs the Rebel Hive Mind, and the Rebel Hive Mind really needs the Actions Board, because Actions is exactly what Extinction Rebellion America is about. It's something that we really don't have anything on the table with right now, and so it's very hard to get funding and to recruit people because we're actually doing any actions. Right, so I totally get that point about the importance of actions as opposed to mobilization. But so I was just thinking about Anne's question seemed to be getting at the fact that the Rebel Hive Mind was pretty underpopulated with people right now, and that might have diminished it in a way, but the Rebel Hive Mind is really, really important, isn't it? And right, so
Is that
what's your role in supporting that from the Actions Board, and how can the Rebel Hive Mind support you at the same time? I guess that's what I'm getting at.
John?
I get confused when you use the word Actions Board. Are you talking about the corporation?
Yes, I'm sorry, John. I'm just referring to that entity that you and JLo have been talking about.
I think the board could easily set up a small infrastructure circle or organization without all of the SOS that exists in the Rebel Hive Mind, and that small group could work with the affinity groups, and we could move along.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that, that it wouldn't be good to have both, and I'm not saying that we can't work together, but I'm not agreeing that we need to have the type of structure that you want to have, although, as I'm sure you know, we had no objections to you trying the structure. When I say you, the Rebel Hive Mind wants to try a structure, great, go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Jane?
Didn't get from Linda's question that, and maybe I'm wrong about this, that she was talking about the types of structure. What I took from Linda's question is that we need each other in certain ways. And Linda, could you let me know if I'm on or off base with this, but that there's value in each of these groups, and that the working together, that Terry, I think you called it the party group or something like that, or can't remember. The party group. But that there's value in affinity groups or people who want to join in whatever way, coming and being able to have some guidance in however they need it, whether that be social media or how to do an action or whatever it is. So was I wrong in that question, Linda, of just trying to acknowledge that there's some value in the board, there's some value in the affinity groups, and there's some value in the Rebel Hive Mind?
Yes, thanks for that, Jane. JLo?
I think John was first.
Oh, John. Sorry, John, you're not on my radar. I've only got 3 people on my screen at once. But
I don't disagree with that general statement, assuming that the Rebel Hive Mind starts to do work. I mean, it's been a couple months and we're not getting anything from all of these groups. I mean, I'll give you an example. We've got 3 people that are going to jail right now in Florida to support Nick, and they had a live feed, they had media they wrote up, and there's no one there to distribute that. And that's the way it's been for weeks and weeks. And at some point, I'm hoping that the people that are involved in the Rebel Hive Mind will start to work. In other words, the people that are in those groups will start to do things, because it sort of frightens me that what you said, okay, now they're going to get there. Now they're going to sit down and write another paper. I thought October 11th was the date that we would start to be working. Does the Rebel Hive Mind have a date? Does the interim group, can you give me a date when you will be working?
I'm going to just say we have been working really hard trying to get this Rebel Hive Mind into place and figure out how to proceed with what we had left over that was beginning to really work. And that disruption has caused a lot of time to be spent on trying to figure out how to reorganize and reshuffle and make this work, because we all want this to work. And part of the time it has taken to get things moving has been because we haven't been able to get any information. A lot of information it would have been a clearer process and quicker process to get moving with the Rebel Hive Mind had we been able to have this kind of conversation weeks ago or whenever. And we haven't, and here we are now. So this is what we're doing. And we've been working very hard on making the Rebel Hive Mind a place where we can actually function.
So do we have a date?
The date is current. We are working really hard.
No, I mean the date when you're going to start working on the functions in the circles.
Terry?
Terry?
Yeah, I think, John, the way I see it, to answer your question is, a week from today, the members of those circles in the Hive will be going into the election process to staff their circles. Those of us in the interim Hive Mind may or may not be in those newly elected groups. We don't know. I don't know who's going to stand for candidacy even. But so given that, I would say this is just kind of a best guess. I would say 2 to 4 weeks from Monday, they should start having project proposals and action plans that they can present to the affinity group.
Do you mean to the board?
I don't know. You tell me. I don't know which one. Here, let me explain a little bit. I think
Hold on. I have a hard
Yeah.
stop. I have a mastermind I have to attend at 6.
Okay,
I apologize. So
Jello, final thoughts, please, before you you opt out.
yeah, I think it's been productive, and I thank everybody for coming together to put this together. And I have a lot more information than I started with, so I appreciate that.
Okay. And are you up for a meeting in a week's time to pick up where we left off?
I'd like to wait until the Rebel Hive Mind has established itself and has their mission and has their movement in place, so that there's the right people to talk to about the right thing, and we don't have to go back and forth with multiple meetings before we get clarity.
Okay.
Okay. So I apologize. I have to jump. Have a beautiful evening.
Yes,
man.
thank you, Jello. Good night.
you know, I would suggest that we should kind of leave it to Ann and John to decide whether they want to continue any conversation or not at this point, or just check out and reconvene later when everybody's
Okay.
available.
I can stay a few more minutes, but not much longer, but I don't want to, Ann is, I know, under a lot of pressure. So what's best for you, Ann?
Well, I was just now collecting more medications at the door for my husband. And he's back in the hospital as of this morning.
I'm sorry to hear that, Anne.
Yeah. So yeah, I am under a lot of pressure, and I don't know for sure, when I'll be able to come to meetings. And I don't know when I'm going to have the next Dragonflies meeting, for that matter. I have not announced it at all. And
Okay.
I wish I could be, where Nick is and helping to protest those people going to jail, because the 3 people I know who are, in addition to Nick, up there, they were not doing anything except writing chalk messages on the Capitol steps about how Nick needs to be freed from being a political prisoner, which he basically is. But anyway, and I probably would be going to jail too, because I think it's all ridiculous that these people are being charged for misdemeanors in such a ridiculous manner.
Okay. So what are you walking away with about this meeting, and just before you go, and thank you so much for attending and your input. Is there what's a takeaway for you in terms of where we move next?
Okay, I feel a little bit more informed than I was. I'm still a little confused about some parts of the Constitution that you guys have written, including the word holacracy, which I'm going to have to look up, because I saw that in the Constitution. I was like, what in the world? But anyway, yeah, I feel like we are still working toward the same goals. We're just doing it in different manners. And I don't like to work in a really structured environment because I've
Mhm.
done that all my working life. Now I'm
Mhm.
retired. I don't feel like I'll have
Mhm.
to do that.
Mhm.
And so, you know,
Okay.
but if you guys feel like you need a more structured environment, then that's fine. But you know, don't be petty with us and attacking us and stuff, because we're on the same team basically. We're working toward the same goals. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, Anne.
Thanks, Ann.
Yeah. Good night.
Bye.
Good night.
So do
Okay.
you have anything you want to speak about before I go? Terry.
Yeah. This is the last time I'll put it this way. I'm really glad, or I really hope, that the dynamic that evolves out of all this is program and project management. I mean, I really do think that's exactly the dynamic that's been missing and is needed, and it's why the walk with Nick succeeded as well as it did, frankly. So having said that, the three parts of that dynamic that I think have to be sorted out between the three groups are: there's a strategic program level oversight and planning. And hand in glove with that is the planning piece of it, which has to connect beyond that strategic oversight into the tactical execution and implementation of whatever it is, whether it's an event or an action or a meeting schedule or whatever. And then the third group is boots on the ground, doing what the project is going to deliver, the deliverables, the outcomes. Those are the three pieces of this dynamic. Don't think about three circles. Think about the three arcs that connect them. Okay, that's the dynamic. That's where the dynamics are.
Mhm.
And which one of those three things that are connected is which group among us. Every project is going to call on us in a different, unique way. I know this as a project and program manager. No two projects are ever identical.
Mhm.
They have some common factors, but the differences make or break every project. And what we're doing right now is a clear example of that. We're stumbling over our differences and we're clinging to our similarities. And that's exactly the way human beings have been for like 300,000 years. But my point just being, at one level, it's really an oversight, a program collection of strategic emphasis and focus. From that flows this, what I would call incremental planning around the baseline of what you're trying to accomplish. Strategy accomplishes the baseline, planning figures out how to execute that baseline, and then execution or implementation delivers the deliverables and produces the outcomes. That's a good program project model, I think, for what I've understood us to be talking about. We all have the same heart to accomplish.
Mhm.
But that's just me as a program and project manager seeing it through those lenses, you know? So.
Jane, final thoughts?
Thank you, Terry and Linda and John. I am glad to have initiated contact. And I think after hearing all of this, it's there's a lot of promise with a lot of ways we could work together and be beneficial with and for each other. So it's very interesting. I think it's very promising, and I think it depends on how we can establish clarity and how to communicate. And I think this is a good start. And I think there's more things to be worked out.
Okay, John?
I want to go back to my question, which at one point, Linda, you thought was outside the scope of the discussion, and that is that we have an announcement concerning the cluster of affinity groups that we have been sitting on for several weeks so that we would not disturb your efforts to recruit people. By you, I mean the Rebel Hive Mind. I'm prepared. I can release it any time. Do you want me to do it now, or would you prefer that I wait until Monday when you can make your announcement? Give us. I don't want to hear that everybody's offended because we announced it at the wrong time. But I'm not going to wait much longer.
Terry,
Can we see it?
When I send it out,
So we don't get to see it before you announce it.
no.
John, come on, man. Seriously?
Why should I show it to you? I mean, you want to approve it?
No, I just like to know what
I'll
it
send it to
says.
you early. I'll send it to you early.
Okay.
Am I going to see the your announcements and all the final roster and things before you announce it to all XR Rebels?
You got access to all the documents that I know of that are currently in.
No, there's going to be an announcement. I'm assuming that before you send it out, you'll share it with JLo and I. Is that fair enough?
Jane.
Not my call.
Yes, we have sent out lots of different announcements and invitations. And as I understand it, John, that you were not interested in getting some of the Hive Mind information. So we'd be
Not
happy
interested in what?
getting being in the Hive Mind email thread.
No.
For getting information. So so we're trying to respect that. I personally, I don't know what you're going to say, but I don't know that it will really affect what Rebel Hive Mind is doing. I appreciate the respectful restraint to allow us time to get this together before your announcement. But it sounds like you've also been moving on this anyway. So I don't know. It doesn't matter to me personally. I don't know that I don't know how the rest of the group would feel. But half the group's here. How do you guys feel, Linda and Terry? Would you prefer John to wait to send that out?
Well, I think it's a moot point, frankly, because it's been made clear that whether we see it or not, it's going out, and we have no review, edit, input opportunity. So it's a moot point. He could send it out right after this meeting, I guess, as far as I'm concerned.
What do you think, Linda?
Yeah, John. I'm all ears for hearing news of positive things that are going on and actions and progress and movement and going forward and rebellion and so I'm all ears clearly, but I'll defer to Jane and Terry. So John.
I don't know. I'm really confused because I'm not sure what Jane and Terry said, but I think what you're all saying is
John.
I can do it whenever I want.
I'm all ears,
That's what
John.
I said, John. My vote is we have nothing to say about it, so send it whenever you feel like it.
Yeah, let's hear it, John. Thank you.
Cool. All right. And the last point I want to make before I leave is that I want to emphasize this, and especially to you, Jane. I'm past it. I got past it after the mediation. So you made a statement today. I think we have to move past it and get on to do our actions. You better talk to Faith because I'm past it and I'm really sick and tired of what she's doing. And it's going to affect everything if she keeps it up. That's really inappropriate, Jane. Really inappropriate. And especially the way she picked on Domio. It's just outrageous.
I'd like to respond to that. And I would only like to say that I'm glad to hear that you are past it and I don't see proof of that. And I don't know. I don't even know how to. I don't think that the mediation was successful in the slightest. And I think there are things that will not be worked out, and that's okay. And I think we have to take that and like put it in a little box, and because I don't know what else to do with it. And I'm not gonna say what Faith is doing or what she's not doing, because I'm not Faith, so I can't answer for her.
Oh, I'm speaking to the interim Rebel Hive Mind when I make those statements.
Yeah.
There were a lot of people that are upset, and some of the other rebels who weren't on the CC list that are going to get to see this, I imagine they're going to be very upset too. So it doesn't make sense to me, but, and to me, it doesn't really matter if you, the fact that you don't consider a mediation a success doesn't excuse the fact that you ignore the mediation. And I'm not talking about you. But
What do you mean by that? Ignored.
I mean, that you start all over again. She's gone to Domio and said, look at all these documents. Oh, John's so mean, you got to do something. Come on. That's what we went to the mediation about.
Okay.
Mediation is
I'm
mediation.
gonna, John, yeah, thank you so
I just want
much.
to make sure it's understood. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, John. Thank you. John, do you want us to leave with an announcement? Like
What do you mean?
the announcement that you wanted to make, would you be happy to share that with us before you go?
I'll talk to J-Lo. I don't, see what he wants to do.
Okay, John.
Just
All
make
right
sure-
then.
If you want to see it in advance, it's so minor that, go ahead, Terry.
Go ahead, Terry.
I have about, see how many little waters in that bottle? I have about that much care whether I see it before it goes out or not. So I'm fine with it on the distribution list. What I do
Okay.
want to make clear though, John, is I had nothing whatsoever to do with the mediation. Okay, I was not there. I have not had any lengthy conversations about it with any of the participants. It was not part of my world. So I don't know if it was successful or not. I know there are people who feel like it was. I know there are people who feel like it wasn't. And I know that both sides of that have very strong feelings about it. You say you're past it. I think that's kind of what Jane is saying she wants, is to have it in a box that she can just blow out the window. So you're not that far apart. I don't know how to tell you to find that it's the common ground, but not having been part of it, just as an independent observer, I just don't see that you're that far apart.
Thank you, Terry. Can we leave it at that?
Sure.
Do we have just in terms of next steps, just kind of quickly, J-Lo mentioned he didn't want to have another meeting until after the 11th. What about, how do you feel, John, about when we get together and talk some more?
I don't think there's a purpose in us getting together until the new group, which I think to some extent is this group, has their mission and other things, prepared. In other words, when you're ready to take action, I don't see a reason to do it.
Okay.
But I don't mind having a line of communication. If some major issue comes up that you want to talk about, I don't mind hearing from any one of the three of you, and I can be the contact. So if you want to set that up, that's fine.
Okay. Thanks, John. Jane?
I'm also communicating with Michelle. I mean, it's about different issues. I got all these different people, and Linda Rodriguez is communicating with me.
Yeah. And we get together as well.
Right.
Thank you, John. Jane?
Yeah, I would like to understand not having a bunch of meeting time before we have much more information to give you. but I think it would be good to know that there is a place or way we can get some information as we formulate what we're doing, like have questions. Hey, we forgot to ask about this, or we haven't clarified that. Is calling or emailing you, John, a good way for any of us to do that? Or like part of what we're doing today is opening this tunnel of communication. So please tell us the best way to get information from this point on.
You can call me or send me an email.
So would you be the main point person of the board then?
I think given J-Lo's schedule right now and Domio's wish to withdraw, that yes, I should do that.
Okay. Thank you.
And I think to the degree possible that you can centralize or pick one person to be the contact, it would be helpful so that I don't get different questions, the same question from different people.
Yeah. I think that's a really reasonable request. Definitely.
That's happened. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Who do you think should be that person, Jane, in terms of just a regular contact person with John?
Well, I think part of that has developed, John, because of in our meetings with Roger. You know how Rogers is great about like, hey, would you do that? All right, great, you do that. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
that has happened. So
I've never seen that. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
So
Do your best. Do your best, Todd.
we'll work on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we're all doing, I think. We're all doing our best, and I think that's a
Yeah.
good recognize.
Whoever it turns out to be will be in touch with you. Say, I got the short straw.
I just got a text from Rick that he got a citation just for filming the 3 on the bridge,
What?
and they're
Wow.
all in jail. So
Wow.
we'll have to get back to him. He's anxious to be reimbursed.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, John and
Okay,
Jane
thank you.
and Terry. Good to see you all.
Thank
And be in
Thank you
touch.
for setting this up, Terry. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Good
See
night.
you later.
Thank you. Good night.
Don't go away.
Yeah. Let's stop the recording, maybe, or not.
Yeah, I will do that.
Can I just get a sip of wine?
Sure.